Daniel Lehrner. I'm a Besu developer at Consensus, and I'm going to talk about the benefits of client diversity. So first of all, let's start with who here knows what client diversity is. Can you raise your hand if you know? Okay, I think almost everybody. So for the people that do not know, in Ethereum, to use Ethereum, we have different software programs. Especially since the merge, we need two pieces of software. We have the execution layer, which is basically the EVM, or whenever you call an RPC endpoint, normally like get balance, if call. And we have the consensus layer, which is the proof of stake part. And for each of those two pieces of software, we have a lot of different implementations. On the execution layer side, we have Geth, which is written in Go, Nethermind in .NET, Besu, which I'm working on in Java, Aragon in Go, Ref in Rust, and Ethereum just in TypeScript, and the same on the consensus layer. We have Prism, which is in Go, Lighthouse, Rust, Deku, Java. Nimbus is written in Nim, which is like a variant of C or C++, no, I'm not sure. We have Lodestar in TypeScript, and we have Grandine. In terms of distributions, on the execution layer side, historically, Geth is what we call a majority client. This means the majority of users are using it. On the consensus layer side, the distribution is more even, mainly because they have all started at the same time. They have all started more or less at the merge. So that's a bit better. So in the end, why are we doing this? So what are the benefits of doing the same piece of software several times? And I'm going to use this iceberg metaphor here, basically starting at the tip of the iceberg, which I think might be the most obvious answers to this, and then we are going down to the less obvious benefits. So the first one is stability. That's the very top. Here we have an example where Vitalik himself wrote on Reddit on the 24th of November 2016. There's a consensus flaw in Geth. We have identified the problem, and now we are in the process of testing a fix for a release. So basically what happened is there was just a bug in Geth. And at the time of writing this, there was already a second client, which was parity. And basically what happened is the two clients processed the same chain, and at some point, because of the bug, they forked off, and we had two chains. So after a while of debugging, they needed to find out, okay, which is the correct one, and basically fix it. So what happened here is that even though Geth, which was at the time the majority client, had a bug, the chain never went down because parity was still there, basically to continue in the meantime. Parity continued the correct fork, and once Geth was fixed, Geth rejoined this fork. So here is basically, I think, maybe the most obvious one. If you write software more than once, every piece of software can have a bug, but that two versions of the same protocol have exactly the same bug is rather unlikely. So we can basically make sure that one of the versions will work normally one at a time. Then the other thing is correctness and error detection. How do we even know that something in the protocol is wrong? So I mean, there are very obvious errors in software. That's normally when the software is crashing. But what if the software just has a bug and it calculates something incorrectly? Here we have an example from the 15th of August 2010, long before Ethereum has existed. This is the Bitcoin Talk forum. There is a user that says, the value out in this block is quite strange. And then here at the bottom it says 92,233,720,368 Bitcoin. Basically what happened is there was a bug in the Bitcoin software and somebody triggered the bug, we don't know if it was on purpose or not, twice and created 180 billion Bitcoin. Even for people that do not know a lot of Bitcoin, they most probably know that there is a very hard limit of 21 million Bitcoin. So 180 billion obviously is way too much. And why I chose this example is Bitcoin traditionally chooses only to run one client normally. What happened here is that this client had just a bug. It produced, in this case, too much Bitcoin, but the chain still continued to run. There was nothing obviously wrong with the chain, just that this one user was really looking at the transaction, was looking at the output, and that's how the error was detected in the first place. This, in the example before from Ethereum, was very different. In Ethereum, two pieces of the same software ran, and then we could see that they diverge. So it was very, very obvious that something is wrong. Here, it was really by luck that somebody checked this. And then at the end, at this time, Satoshi was still around. They fixed the bug, basically rolled the chain back. There were like 50 blocks afterwards produced. They were afterwards invalid. And then they had a valid chain again. Then the next point is not just avoiding errors, but especially avoiding catastrophic errors. Here, 6 months before the merge, Dankrad Feist, one of the Ethereum Foundation researchers, wrote an article that says, Ethereum merge, run the majority client at your own peril. So why did he write this? Before, in proof of work, in the first example that we saw, when one of the clients had a bug, it in the end produced an invalid fork, but you could always go back. With the merge and with the change to proof of stake, we have a new concept which is called finalization. Finalization means at some point, normally after what we call 2 epochs, which is around 12.8 minutes, the chain finalizes if it has more than 2/3 of the votes, and you cannot go back anymore. This is a very, very nice property because you know for sure if your transaction was in a block that has finalized, it will never revert again. But there is one problem with this. I don't want to go into too much details because it's basically not the goal of this talk. But in the finalization process, if a client, a majority client who has more than 2/3 of the nodes or of the stake has a bug, it will produce the invalid chain A. And it will attest, which is basically vote, for the 2 blocks. These are the two red errors. Even if the bug is detected because we have other clients who will let us know that, and the bug is fixed, all the clients that were on chain A cannot go back to chain B anymore. Because in order to do that, they would need to vote here for what is marked as the X. And this is not allowed by the protocol, because they basically jump over one of their own votes. And this is what we call a slashable offense. Slashable offense means the validator does something that can cause the chain to not find consensus. So we are not sure which of the two chains is correct, and this is what could happen here. Okay, so this was a very, very serious problem, and Dankworth wrote this like half a year before the merge. So the most logical outcome most probably would be that people would be aware of this, and people and validators would make sure that no client had more than 2/3. At least that's what we thought. The reality looked very, very different. So this is the client distribution from beginning of this year, and GEF had around 84% of the stake of all the nodes. So this means we had a ticking time bomb for 1.5 years, where basically one consensus bug in GEF would have triggered the outcome before. And if this would have happened, we would have destroyed billions of dollars of value in ETH in order to revert to the correct chain. Okay, so now we had this ticking time bomb. What should people do? I'm one of the developers of a minority client, so we tried our best to make our software competitive. But then, unfortunately, Murphy's Law hit, and we had in Besu on the 6th of January a bug that basically took the node down. And the second one is from Nethermind, which is the number 2, which was 2 weeks after. So within 2 weeks, the number 2 and the number 3 client had a problem. So we had now the issue that GEF had already this huge majority, plus we had 2 problems. Surprisingly, those 2 events led to the outcome that people finally were talking about the problem with the finalization of a supermajority client. Here, a big shout out to the ETH staker community, to Nixo, to Yorick Down. They really educated people about this problem, and stakers and validators finally realized, okay, that's a huge issue, we need to do something. And that's why right now it looks like this. So GEF has gone down from 84 to 52, so it's below the 2/3. The issue, basically this was outlined before, it cannot happen anymore. Besu and Nethermind have both increased a lot, so now the situation looks much better. But what this also means is client diversity is a choice. The community has to choose it. If not, even though we have several implementations of the same software, it will not happen. Here is one example where this does not work. If people are thinking about Bitcoin, they must probably just think about one client. In reality, Bitcoin has 14 different clients. Some of them just on mobile, because Bitcoin is more light client friendly. Others are full nodes. But despite that, 98.63% of all the nodes are running Bitcoin Core. So even though a lot of clients would be available, the Bitcoin community chooses to run only one, which basically means they do not get the benefits from client diversity that they actually could have very easily. Then here's another point that's maybe already a bit more hidden, is to make the specification of the protocol easily accessible. When several teams across the globe work on the same piece of software, you are basically forced to first start with a specification. You're basically forced to first write down, okay, what actually are we going to do it? And we have several resources in Ethereum for that. We have the Ethereum Magicians Forum, which basically normally is where discussions are starting about changes. We have the EIP process, which is then the actual spec of the changes. We have the Ethereum execution spec tests on the execution side, which basically means all the changes that we are doing and all the protocol rules are available really as tests that you can run. So all the clients can run the same tests, and this is very clearly defined what is the expected behavior. Another thing that we have that is less blind spots. With client diversity, you will never have no blind spots, but at least you can reduce your blind spots. What I mean with this is when we look where core developers are located, we have a big number in North America, big number in Europe, and a big number in Australia. This means geographically, more or less, the distribution is not so bad. But we have, for example, right now, no team in Asia, no team in Africa, no team in South America. If people were yesterday at Justin Drake's talk about the beam chain, at least the situation should improve for Latin America and for Asia, and we will have 2 new teams. And basically the goal is that they can bring their own view, their own life experience into the process, and they can help us reduce our blind spots, which developers from the Western world maybe do not see. So for example, people who use stablecoins in Latin America or Asia, I think most core devs right now are not in situations where they would really need this. Then when you have different clients, those clients can do different improvement and experiments. Here I have just for every execution client one. There are a lot of them, but we can quickly go over that. Nethermind has, for example, done a lot of performance work recently. They have reached 1 gigagas, which is like our goal for layer 2s. In Besu, we have parallel transaction processing. So right now on Ethereum mainnet, you can do parallel transaction processing without problems, which is also something that was long ago also for L2s. Aragon has worked very hard to make archive nodes run on consumer hardware. Especially the disk requirement went down from like 16 terabyte to 3 or 4. Ref has introduced execution extensions, which basically allow you to modify the client without forking it. And another example is EOF. If you don't know much about EOF, if you're a smart contractor, you will like it because it basically gets rid of the stack to deep errors. And it finally allows us to safely increase the smart contract size limit eventually. And this is mainly driven by the minority clients. And then if you think, okay, I'm running a majority client, what benefit do I have? The benefit is that the majority client eventually can copy the features. For example, here, this is Peter, the team lead of the Go Ethereum of the Geth team, tweeting out that they will the XX, the execution extension support from Ref, will also do it to Geth. So because one of the minority clients introduced it, finally the majority client gets it as well. Here is another slide, which is a bit more abstract, but you have a lower risk of protocol capture or failure. There are, if you have just one team, there are different types of attacks a government could do. They maybe cannot detect the protocol, but they could infiltrate the team, or they can pressure somehow the team to push a change that they like. A team can withhold updates, something that the community maybe really wants. The team cannot force the community to run a specific software, but the team can say, okay, this one update, we do not like it, we will not ship it. And then the community will have a very hard time to get it. And simply, if you have one team, they can just eventually abandon the client. So then, again, you have a problem. And then we go to the last point, which is in the end, permissionless contributions to the protocol. This is very abstract, but in the end, what this means, if you have client diversity, it means everybody can become a core dev, including everybody here in the room. So if somebody is interested in this, here in the slide, we have the different repositories of the clients. This is if you are interested in programming. There are also other things. If you want to just keep up with the protocol, on Twitter you can follow Tim Baker or Christine Kim. They always share updates. You can join the Discord server. You can look at the EPS. There are a lot of things to do. So that's basically it. So thank you for your attention.
And we will go through questions. If fork A never finalized, a validator that voted in fork A can later attest in fork B when the fix is released. Can they do that without getting slashed?
Yes. So this means if the majority client has less than 2/3, that is possible. Yes. So the main thing is really no client should have more than 2/3 of the staking votes.
So we have some more time for questions. We have more questions in the queue. Does anybody want to ask a live question? We have one over here.
Ah, there is one.
Oh, how do you get the numbers on different clients running different running nodes?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. So in the end, we have no reliable way of doing that. People do some sort of fingerprinting where they analyze different blocks that are proposed, and then they can basically estimate which CL clients they are. For the execution clients, we do not have that. There were recently proposals. We have like one field when you propose a block where people can basically write random data. There are proposals to basically write in which EL and which CL you run, and then we have better estimations. But the numbers that I showed before, they mainly rely on self-reporting. So the big staking providers in the end report the numbers, and then there is like a huge chunk of, I don't know, 1/3 of the network we do not know. But for the worst case assumption, we just say it's the majority client. And still with this worst case assumption, no client has more than 2/3. But yeah, we do not have exact numbers, we only have approximation of the numbers.
Thank you. Could you steelman the argument that Bitcoin puts forward for having one client and why it's wrong?
Yeah, so one client in the end means there is less politics involved, maybe in discussing changes. So in Ethereum's case, you basically have to convince different teams that they want to change. Although Bitcoin is quite resistant to change by itself. The other approach, I don't know. I mean, it's like what I mentioned before with the capturing of a team. But yeah, so for me, it's actually hard to steelman this. You just avoid maybe, I don't know, certain errors by using more than 2 clients. But yeah, as I said, for me, the benefits far outweigh the down.